So what's the name of the podcast?
Drink port.
So it's called Drink Port?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Drink Port.
The Thanksgiving special.
The Thanksgiving special. Thank you. Obviously, this is a little different because I'm here, Pete Fryer, Rebecca's amazing husband, which I know she was going to say that.
Exactly.
And I'm interviewing Rebecca this time because she spent all this time interviewing experts. So why not have the expert on Rebecca interview Rebecca?
Oh, there we go.
So before we get started, though,
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for hosting.
Mm-hmm. So I was told to do some homework and to come up with questions. So I've got my James Lipton stack of index cards. Rebecca has no clue what these are. And so I'm going to go ahead and shuffle these up so that way I don't know what order they're in. But it's a good mix of questions about port.
Okay.
It's also a good mix of questions about Rebecca. So that way you, the audience, get a better feel for who she is, and then maybe a little bit about what my day-to-day is like. So let's see. The first question is, why do you love me so much?
Is that the first question?
No, that's not the first question.
I was like, this was a terrible idea.
It's a horrible idea. Okay, so first question.
Yes.
It's a real serious question.
Okay.
So for as long as I've known you, you love wine.
Sure do.
But why are you so passionate specifically about port wine?
Yes. Great question. So it's actually timely too, because this is around Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So I've not seen these questions, just to repeat that. I think what makes port so special, and my entry into port has been through cooking and entertaining. So growing up, we had a few dinner parties where I always distinctly remember when the port came out, because it was that moment where it was something new, something different. And it was always served in these smaller glasses, and it kept the conversations going and it kept dinner parties going. And for me, that's the magic of port. I think for any wine necessarily, but there's something really special about uncorking kind of stories and conversations and bringing people together. And I think now more than ever, we need to bring people together.
So it's not the alcohol content specifically.
That helps.
That helps?
Sometimes, yeah.
So it's all about, because you're always passionate, I've always been passionate about dinner parties and get-togethers. So it's any excuse to extend the get-together, the party.
It's like putting another log on the fire. That's what I always say. It just keeps the gatherings going. And I'll argue, I think some of the best stories, maybe even fights, come out of port wine.
Well, that fight turns into a story later.
It totally does. So then you tell that story at the next dinner party, and it just kind of keeps going.
So what are you most passionate about other than port, Maine, and sailing?
Writing.
Yes. Okay, why writing?
That's the only thing that I'm like somewhat talented and skilled at. And I think it's really hard to kind of brag and talk about yourself like that. But I just know in my heart of hearts that writing is truly something that I'm decent at. I wouldn't say I'm, F. Scott Fitzgerald, but
but more like an Ernest Hemingway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Both members of the Lost Generation. So yeah, it would be writing for me. And it's the thing that's come most naturally and most organically. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think I was going to say
no,
you?
No. I was just curious. I mean, I probably should have written that down as like one of the other things that I know you're passionate about, but.
What did you think I was going to say?
I had no clue.
Bo.
No, Bo, our cat, or Penelope, or your husband, your family. I don't know. Then, what is your favorite type of article of clothing?
I think you know the answer to that.
I do know, but they don't.
Okay. A sweater.
Mm-hmm.
Cashmere.
Has to be cashmere.
Has to be cashmere, even if it's 80 degrees. I stand by cashmere. I'm always cold and it's very temperature regulating to me. And I'm rarely hot. So like I can wear it in, hot climates, remains to be seen in Virginia. But you can also buy short sleeve cashmere.
Who would do that?
I might. So yeah, and either in navy blue or black.
No other colors?
I don't really look good in colors.
I thought you were a gemstone person.
Yes, someone did tell me that jewel tones.
Jewel tones,
like
excuse me.
maroons, like forest greens. I feel comfortable in those.
This
port is delicious.
It is, yes.
So good.
You can take another sip?
I am.
Okay, well.
I finished the bottle.
Back to port.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite style of port?
Ooh. So I do love tawnies. For some reason, I always associate them with woodsy, like fire, like fall and winter. I associate with tawnies. But I think my first... Oh, did you lose your cards?
I almost did. I was trying to be slick over here.
I think the obvious answer is vintage port, and I can recount? I can recall.
Recall?
There you go. It's like I'm a writer.
Well, we didn't say why you're so good at writing.
A great vintage port that we had, actually with your family down here over Christmas that I really enjoyed. And but I think it depends on the mood, because we had a great Ruby Reserve with our neighbors back in Winchester with the chocolate tart and the raspberries. And it was a lot of fruit, but it was pretty darn good. So yeah, I'm all over the map with port. I kind of don't really discriminate. Never had pink port. I'm not a rosé girl. I think it's about drinking something pink that I can't get behind. But
what about so pink lemonade's out of the question. What are your thoughts on white port and cocktails? Weekend cocktails with port.
I can't form an honest opinion about it because I haven't tried enough. Dabbled in. I know that port has certainly made a huge resurgence in the cocktail world. Mixologists are using it quite a bit now. But I would say I'm partial to the port and tonic because that's the one that I'm most familiar with that we've had. And I like that one because it's the chip dry is really nice. It's, doesn't like hit you in the face like other experiences. But
what other experiences?
Other mixed drinks.
Okay.
Like a martini. A drink, Pete. A drink. Oh my gosh.
I don't know what you were going with there.
I can edit this.
Yeah, I don't know where you were going with that. Okay. Sticking on that cocktail trend, if you were a cocktail, what cocktail would you be?
By name alone, dark and stormy. Right? That's an obvious one. But it's funny. I'm thinking because I'm so used to asking questions, and these are great ones, and I'm trying to think of your response, like what you would answer this as. I think it would be a martini.
Me?
Dry, straight up, no twist.
Really?
Straightforward. You know what you're going to get. Crystal, like cold and like to the touch, but just like really well.
Simple.
Yes.
Straightforward. Classic. Refined.
Yes. Elegant.
See how those are all the characteristics I was going to use to describe you.
I think I'm a margarita.
Margarita.
I really do. A margarita, like, it's just a party and it just wants to be friends with everyone. And I don't think people are offended by a margarita.
No one's offended by a margarita.
I don't think a margarita hurt anybody.
You can put some tahini if you want a little spice. You can go nothing on the rim, straight up. Over the rocks, you can do it iced.
There are a lot of different versions of a margarita. And I think it's a crowd pleaser. So that's maybe what I would be.
I like that.
Did you think of something for me that I should have answered?
No, I didn't think of the answers to any of these questions.
Do you think that I was spot on with a martini for you?
Yeah, sure. I don't know what I would be. I would have to think about that. So then what is your favorite thing about alcoholic beverages?
Well, it does bring people together. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I learned at a very young age that putting out food and drinks doesn't have to be alcohol, is the best way to make friends.
Well, alcohol helps.
I sound like a politician.
Yeah, you do.
I'm not.
Are you running in 2020?
Absolutely not.
2028? Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Well, then I think also what's nice about alcohol is for some folks, it can, if you have the right amount, it can loosen you up.
Yes.
Right. So that social lubricant's nice, where you might get someone that you've just met going, where you're, oh, this person's more interesting than I thought they were going to be. Right. Well, or vice versa. It could make you like, ooh, this person's boring.
Speaking of my good friend Hemingway, he once famously said, I drink to make other people more interesting. And my take on that was, I drink to make myself more interesting.
Your crutch? Is that what you're saying?
It's my crutch. It makes me more interesting.
That's why you're trying to start a brand.
Exactly.
Speaking of Hemingway, this is kind of in his vein in alcohol. He was a man of the islands. If you were stranded on a desert island, what book would you bring for entertainment? You only get one.
Yeah. For entertainment.
Yes, for entertainment.
Okay. So I'm currently reading / listening to, because anyone who produces a memoir that narrates it themselves is just, I think, beautiful. Ina Garten, Be Ready When the Luck Happens. I always say, like, a good book is one that comes along when you need it most and when you didn't know you needed it. And Be Ready When the Luck Happens is a book that I just needed to hear right now. And she's just so inspiring and real, and her own person and her own very strong brand. And I've always admired her, but this is like, I've just been blown away by that book. So for entertainment, I'm going to read it again, even though I haven't finished it. But I think that would be my go-to.
Interesting. So this one I was expecting F. Scott Fitzgerald.
So I was going to go with This Side of Paradise.
Yeah.
Which is allegedly his first book, but they say it's kind of an autobiography. They always say you write what you know, and that's definitely the case with him in this book. And that book came to me at a time where I had just moved to New York, and I've always been enamored with writers of the lost generation who experienced World War I. They were finding themselves through all of that, and him and Hemingway. This is like the Hemingway podcast now. So, but This Side of Paradise has always stayed with me and forever will.
Yeah, I just can envision in that, so I haven't read it, but just knowing F. Scott Fitzgerald, like a scene of the characters at the end of a dinner party having a glass of port.
Yeah. It's 1920s too, New York. A really wild time, and he had, graduated Prince Emery, Blaine's character, graduated Princeton, was trying to figure out his next move, and it's just a good coming of age during a coming of age time in American history. That's why I love it. So yeah. Yeah.
See, that's why I thought that was going to be your answer, but Ina.
Ina Garten.
You do love Ina.
You always loved her.
You love Ina. A good episode with her making dinner for Jeffrey, right? And then whenever you watch her and she makes a cocktail, she's like, it's a couple ounces, and it's like whoosh. And it's the biggest pour you've ever seen, so you know they're the strongest cocktails ever.
And I think that her Jeffrey, there's a yin to the yang there, and in the way that you and I work together, it's very similar in the way we collaborate. From what I've read through Ina's experience, it's a very strong partnership where he's such a supporter of her and believes in her so much. And that's, you've always been that for me. So,
that's nice.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you that are prepping for the SAT, it's Ina is to Jeffrey as Rebecca is to Pete.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And Jeffrey's also very practical and, very, just like you, very,
That makes me sound like such a stick in the mud.
No, on the contrary. I think that you need a balance, because I'm totally very, creative and imaginative and doing, 10,000 things, running a mile a minute. And then you're very steady and, easier to predict. You have a lot of qualities that I envy because I don't have them.
That's nice. Thank you. And right back at you.
Yeah.
Like
this pork's just making me very sappy.
Yeah, seriously, no kidding. So then when you're hosting a dinner party or at a dinner party, What's your favorite moment during the dinner party?
Ooh. I love the moment, like, again, this is where port comes into it because we usually port's an after dinner drink. But I like the moment like after the dessert plates have been cleared and there's that kind of people are just lingering around the table and they've really warmed up. They've gotten to really know each other and lean into the conversation. And I like intimate parties. It doesn't need to be like a 14-person thing, which we've done. And that's when I know I've kind of made it too, because I still, believe it or not, get nervous when I host a dinner party.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so important to find something that makes you a little bit like, ooh, makes you feel something.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that little, it's like even Ina, to get back to her, she mentioned she loves the adrenaline and stuff. I wouldn't say I'm an adrenaline junkie, but I think that there's something to be said for doing something that you're kind of not outside your comfort zone, because I do feel very comfortable cooking, but it's just you're expressing yourself. It's the most special thing you can do for someone, I think, is cook and bring them into your home. And, so I get nervous. I don't want to disappoint. I'm a perfectionist. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are you a perfectionist about specifically? Is it everything? Is it one thing?
I mean, here's how much of a perfectionist I am. Maybe this isn't perfectionist. Maybe it's like, so those lamps, those swing arm lamps that we have in the guest room.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell you what I took them down after it spent like an hour in putting them up. I bought new ones that were more expensive. And because I just knew in my heart that those lamps,
they didn't bring joy.
I just knew that to me in my mind wasn't the vision I was going for. And I use that little lamp example because that's kind of who I've been my whole life, is if I have a vision for something, I really need to see it through with certain specific things. I'm a perfectionist at, and I like it to be in my vision.
It's also signs that I haven't been to the guest room since we moved in because
you're not a guest yet.
That's true. I had no clue that happened.
Yeah.
What else have you changed about this house that I'm not aware of?
You'll know. You'll find it.
Yeah. No, I won't. Yeah. So then, this is 2-part. Okay. Brace yourself.
How many questions do you have? I normally just ask 5 when I'm in
I did a bunch because I wanted to make sure that you had ample things to slice and dice. And I think they're good questions, and we're going through them relatively quickly. Yeah. So remember, 2-parter.
Okay.
What is your favorite movie category?
I mean, off the top of my head, rom-com. Because that's kind of my go-to. Yeah.
Okay. So I knew that was going to be your answer. So now comes the hard part of the question. You can only pick one movie out of that category. What's your favorite?
My favorite, though, is You've Got Mail. That would be, that is a romantic comedy. That's Nora Ephron. It's Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan.
There's Golden Retrievers.
It's Upper West Side in the fall, and then Christmas, and then spring comes, and then
your favorite city.
That's a masterpiece in my mind.
I feel like a big event happened in your life in the park at the end of the movie.
Sure did. Got engaged.
Oh, where was that?
Riverside Drive.
Riverside Drive, right? Yeah. Interesting. It's funny how someone remembered that.
I haven't forgotten it.
No, I'm talking about me remembering that was your favorite movie. And anyways, just tooting my own horn as I typically do.
Yes.
So then, why call it Starboard?
Well, I was a sailing instructor for many, many summers, 5 or 6 summers, but grew up in and around the water. That's what happens when you're on an island. And I remember joking that I wanted to create a port wine and call it Starboard, because I just thought port and starboard, ha ha ha, very clever.
Plus, this has been a passion of yours, it sounds like, forever, of having this idea. It's been in the back of your brain, even though it might have been a little bit of a joke. Yeah,
sure. And I think it was an idea that came out, quite honestly, during the pandemic when we were quarantined in Boston. And I just remember I walk every day and going for the same walk. And I was thinking, well, what do I love to do if in a perfect world? What do I love to do? What can I create in the same vein of like dinner parties, bringing people together. What am I passionate about? Where are my strengths? And where are my skill set, my experience, and industry knowledge? Because I do work in the beverage alcohol space with a lot of entrepreneurs, and no one's talked about port, no one's touched port, and I think that's a missed opportunity. Now, you could argue, and this gets into a whole other conversation about, port, it takes so much to produce and the yield is always so small. Millennials, Gen Zers aren't drinking as much wine. It's, 60% of consumers are boomers, that people are going no alc, low alc, all that stuff. So there's it's an uphill climb, but I do see there are a lot of opportunities actually for port to be.
Well, not to lead the witness or to give too much away, but we did have a recent conversation where it sounded like port used to be popular in America.
Sure did.
It sure was. So we'll learn more about that on another episode.
We will.
So what is a profession you've never had or done that you think you'd be really great at?
I would have loved to have been a broadcast journalist because I love looking for a story. It's a different kind of like archaeology. And it's just, you're digging deep to uncover the truth. And without getting too much into it, I would have loved to have been a broadcast journalist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you have to start on the sideline person where they're in the weather and they're holding on like Al Roker?
Well, that's a meteorologist.
I know, I get that, but I'm saying you have to be the beat person first, right?
I was a what was I? I was an associate producer at ABC News Radio, and I wrote 35 stories a day, churned them out at 3 a.m. in a windowless newsroom on the Upper West Side, and wrote for all the markets across the country. So it really wasn't, I'd leave at the end of the day around noon. I think my shift ended, if that was the 3 a.m. shift I was on that day. And I remember knowing what happened in Albuquerque and Chattanooga and all the small markets. But it was fun because I got to learn how mainstream media is produced, the psychology behind it, why you consume certain things, the way you consume them. There is a whole kind of
psychology.
There's an art, yes, and a skill, yes.
If you were a port of entry, where would you be located and why?
That's just a funny question. Like a harbor, a port.
Yeah, port of entry.
Port city.
Yeah, if you're a port of entry, a harbor. Yeah.
Well, Maine.
Okay, where in Maine?
Camden.
Camden.
It's classic.
Yeah.
That's where I originally grew up.
There's an interesting or fun fact about the elevation in the water. You tell me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's called Where the Mountains Meet the Sea, and it's also the jewel of the Maine coast. And allegedly, a friend told me this. I don't know. We can fact check this. But on the eastern seaboard, it's one of the highest elevation points, down to the ocean. You don't experience or see that
elevation
depth.
Change.
Yeah, until I think you get down to South America.
I think it's like Brazil or something like that.
Yeah. So I don't know how we're going to fact check this. We'll have to.
What's the
fastest?
What's the fastest elevation change? I'm sure the audience will fact check you, and then there's gonna be a big comment.
Camden, Maine, because it's quintessential. It's windjammers. It's always my selling point when people ask what makes Maine so special. For people who are just experiencing Maine for the first time, it gets you out of the southern coastal part of Maine, so you're kind of away from a ton of the tourists and the sandy beaches, and you're into a part of Maine that's just really quintessential. Again, like historic windjammers, you have the rolling Camden Hills, you have fog, the pristine Penobscot Bay. I'm biased. I think it's the prettiest part of the world because I'm not well traveled. So.
you stick to your corner.
You stick to my
So not Miami? Miami's not.
No. I'm not a Florida girl.
Okay.
No, too hot.
Baltimore?
Cashmere doesn't really go well.
No. Well, you could get your sleeveless cashmere sweater, vest, whatever the heck that you can make. You can be the first one.
Exactly.
I ask questions for a living. So
You do.
I do.
Yeah. Didn't think of it like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just gotta learn about people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's nice.
What have you learned about me?
What have I learned about you? That you think I'm a martini.
That's why we're friends.
Yeah, it's friends. Yikes. Demoted from husband to friend.
Yeah.
All it took was a 30, 45-minute conversation and one kid. What is your favorite Thanksgiving memory? Tying it back to this episode, the week of this episode.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I know. That's why I wrote it.
It would have to be up in Woodstock, Vermont, where my grandparents lived.
And
they have
another memory in New England, huh?
Class. I mean, I would say my grandparents, I'm 125% biased when they say this, but they just did it right. Like, if you're a New England person, they did New England the way that like people think about New England. Like, they lived, you know, in the heart of Woodstock, Vermont, across from the covered bridge. Like, you know, it was the beautiful, this is their dining room table actually from that house. Yeah. Woodstock, Vermont, and a specific one, I would just be young. So
we have one last question for you.
Yes.
If you're to have a dinner guest, living or dead, can't be me, obviously. Who would you pick? I mean, I know the answer.
That's actually the opening question of Drinkboard.
Well, we're using it as the closer because this is my
and you
episode.
know I don't know the answer to this.
Yes, you do.
I really don't.
Well, guess what? Put up or shut up. You got to have an answer now.
Yeah. Do you know?
You knew this question was coming.
No, I didn't.
I thought I had to ask this question.
No, the closing question of Drinkboard is always, do you drink port? And if so, describe your ideal.
We'll come back to that. Let's get back to this dinner party one.
Yeah.
Dinner guest.
Yes, living or dead.
I
mean, if I could, this is unoriginal, but if I could take all those Lost Generation writers and bring them all together in a room. I mean, Hemingway.
You have to pick one. You have to pick one, though.
Yeah, one. Okay. I think I would do Aaron French of The Lost Kitchen.
Aaron French. Interesting. Someone that you could actually physically go see.
Yeah. And then my parents actually handed her a drink port card.
How'd that
go? But here's the thing. It's because whenever you have an idea for something, you put it out, it's energy, right? You just put it out into the universe. Someone's going to take that idea if you don't follow through with it. And
do you have any experience with that?
Well, yeah, Aaron French in The Lost Kitchen. So she did what I've kind of always ideated in my mind and talked to other people about. Now I have another hospitality idea that I've been not going to talk about here, but I do love, so Erin French is a Maine girl, and she is a self-taught cook, entertainer, just a total creative, and has a really strong brand and aesthetic, and has a really interesting story. Definitely grab her memoir. That's one worth checking out, called Finding Freedom. And she built this mini empire off a dirt road in Freedom, Maine, small rural town, and has been all over the map. People come from all over the world to come to her restaurants. You make reservations via postcard. I would totally subscribe. That's something that I would create, but I didn't. And even reading her newsletters, it's something that I could write myself. It feels like I wrote it when I read her stuff. And so I think it could be really interesting just because there's so many similarities. And her passion for just using simple, really delicious ingredients in season, and just, that's it. And bringing people together.
That theme again.
That darn theme.
That theme again. So then back to your last question. Do you drink port? And what was the last bit of it?
Oh, and if so, what's your ideal scene? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah.
So I would say by a fire, outside, bundled up in cashmere with you, with someone I love.
Oh, and another person that we love. Another friend. He can stay because he's basically made of cashmere.
He's softer than cashmere.
If I could turn this into a coat or a coat liner.
We might have to one day.
He'll be stuffed.
Taxidermy bow.
Originally not a cat guy. But this one turned me over. But we're going to stuff him. We're going to taxidermy him. And we're going to put like wires in him. So that way you can put him in different positions. So like
you can mold him.
Yeah, so he can curl up on your pillow like he does at night. Or, I could put him outside the bathroom door. So when you open it up, he's just sitting there. you know,
What do you think of all this?
what do I think of all of this?
Yeah.
So you've known this. I've been I would argue, biggest champion. Because so me being the practical one from the standpoint of I'm not a creative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really good at execution and big thinking, as far like big strategic thinking.
Yeah.
That I would argue is my best, or one of my best skill sets.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
and being very pragmatic.
Yeah, pragmatic. Sometimes I can be a little too direct.
I was trying to tell this to someone recently. You have a very different voice. Like you dial it up, like on sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like Pete 2.0.
Yeah, there's professional Pete, and then there is it's almost like my broadcast voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have a face for radio.
I do. I have funny enough, that was my original degree.
Really? God,
yeah.
I could have gone in broadcast. We could have met at ABC News Radio.
Originally, I was in radio, television, and film.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to be a play-by-play radio announcer for baseball. That career died in the 1920s. So.
But anyway, what do you think of this?
Oh, yeah. Long-winded answer. So back to you. I've always admired how creative you are. Yeah. And
that's a double-edged sword.
Well, because you've got so many great ideas, whether it be Starboard or what you do for your job, or she mentioned writing. She's an incredible writer. You really are. And like your articles, the passages I've seen from different excerpts of books that you've written and not finished. You're going to finish this one.
I am.
And you're going to turn it in.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I do think Starboard has legs based off of what you've told me when we were all quarantined and working from home together. I got to hear a lot of your conversations with these experts and listen to your podcast. I definitely think this has legs. Mm-hmm. The question is, when do you pivot from ideation and R&D into, if the goal is to actually produce a Starboard wine,
what does that look like?
What does that look like? And you do need a Hal person. Yeah. Right? Because you're so good at the...
we are hiring.
Yeah. But like you're so...
COO.
You're so good at the branding and the content and the ethos of what Starboard is. And like we've talked already a lot about bringing people together. And like that's so clear. Right. Like your vision's very clear. Right. It's, okay, when do you get to the actual delivery part? And you're very good at what you do right now, but you haven't gotten to, you're in the cocoon, right?
Yeah,
like
that's my safe spot, like cashmere cocoon.
Yeah, like the very hungry caterpillar, which we've been reading a lot to Penelope.
That
right?
reminds me of you.
It's my favorite book as a kid. I wonder why.
I read it again to her tonight.
He ate one chocolate cake, one lollipop,
and then he had a stomach ache.
And
then the next day he eats a big green leaf, and he feels so much better.
Go figure. So, anyways, I feel like you're in that that lead up phase, like you're in the cocoon where you've had all these really great ideas, and you're gonna hatch from that cocoon into this great metamorphosis.
A moth or a butterfly?
Well, butterfly, obviously.
Okay.
It's a really cool idea. Starboard was one of the first alcoholic drinks I ever ordered when I was 21 years old.
You mean port?
What'd I say?
Starboard.
Clearly it was Starboard. I traveled into the future and then I came back.
Was it one of your first?
Mm-hmm.
When you turned 21?
Legally. So I turned 21.
Really?
Well, one of the most memorable.
Don't lie in the podcast. Yeah, I remember being in New York with you and you ordered port in the afternoon, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I'm a pretty cool guy.
Yeah. The cat likes you.
Yeah, well, he likes me more than you. Sure. You're going to steal him? Poor guy. Poor guy.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
There he is.
You're her own Velveteen Rabbit or her corduroy bear.
Is there anything else you want to ask him?
The only question I have for him is...
Gobble till you wobble.
Is he going to eat any more food off our plate, especially during Thanksgiving? Thank you so much for joining me, for entertaining me with my silly questions. Cheers. In my favorite cheers.
Yep.
I love you.
Love you too. That's a wrap.
Yep.
Drink port. And you can go edit this. Thanks for listening to Drink Port, a podcast from Starboard. Interested in being featured? Visit starboardwine.com/podcast to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter so you can join the venture to a new port. Cheers and drink port.